hello there, good afternoon, depending on where you are, I suppose, in the world. Welcome to This Week in WordPress, number 152, I think we're on. I'm joined this week by three lovely guests, one of whom I don't think Tim Nash, you've been on this before, but welcome, Tim Nash. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Thank you very much for having me. And no, I was meant to come in January and then things happened.
Yes, say no more. But we're joined by Tim Nash, and we'll no doubt be plumbing his expertise during the show because he's a very, very knowledgeable person. Speaking of knowledgeable person, Bernhard Gronau is joining us again as well. How are you doing,
Hello.
Bernhard?
Oh, quite good, quite good.
Good. Bernhard, you're in a different location. Where are you today?
I've been here before on the show. I'm in Carinthia, in the south of Austria, on a business trip. A little bit of skiing and my graphic designer, she lives here, so we meet up on a regular basis to just catch up and have a little bit of fun. And
Nice. Oh, well, that's lovely. And finally, Paul Lacey. How are you doing this week, Paul?
So am I not a clever person? So
do you know what? The moment the words Paul Lacey left my lips, I thought I didn't say he's a clever person. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, well, it's probably true. So yeah, I'll just be Paul Lacey, WordPress consultant over here. I'm a bit clever. I know a few things, but I'm definitely not as clever as Tim and Bernhard. And Nathan, I don't think we've ever tried to out-clever each other, so we haven't figured out who's the cleverest yet.
Well, I don't think there's very little point in doing that because there's only one winner, and it's Tim. Basically, Tim's going to win. Yep. So, oh, you mean me and you? Well, I think one day we should have a game of Kaplunk or something to finally decide. Okay, all right. No. Connect Four.
Let's just stay friends.
Okay.
It's safer that way.
We will get on with some WordPress stuff in a minute, but Cameron Jones in the comment, for some reason last week, we ended up talking about plumbers a lot. And inadvertently, I just used the word plum. So no, that was not a reference to last week. It was entirely by accident. But thank you for joining us all the way from Australia, Cameron. I don't know what time it is there, but thanks for, I'm guessing, staying up late. And George, how are you doing? If you have any comments, sorry for this bit, guys, but we have to sort of go through this. If you've got any comments, please go to wpbuilds.com/live. You need to be logged into Google because that's a YouTube stream. And if you're in our Facebook group, you can go to wpbuilds.com/Facebook and you can comment over there. And any comments that you put, we should be able to see, and we'll put them on to the screen if we can. This is all about the WordPress news for the week commencing 22nd of February. So basically this time last week, I go around and find the bits that I believe are interesting. And then Paul and I generally have a chat on a Friday afternoon. And he says, no, none of those are interesting. How about these 7 instead? So we use those. And that's how it goes. But we are gonna talk about WordPress stuff. We are wpbuilds.com. I'll just share my screen. There we are, wpbuilds.com. We produce a podcast each week, and this episode, we're calling that This Week in WordPress. If you want to keep up to date with any of that stuff, there's a menu link here. Subscribe. Just fill out the forms. There's things like the option to subscribe to us on your podcast player of choice or join our Facebook group, the usual stuff. We post all of the news episodes in this archive here. It's called This Week in WordPress Video. So if you ever wanted to go back, I feel that most of the content in here is probably of limited value after the week is gone because we move on to the next week. Nevertheless, there it all is. And if you want to subscribe to our newsletter specifically, we use a third-party SaaS app for this now called Curated, and it's over at news.wpbuilds.com. So that's all I've got to say. Let's make a start. So the first thing I wanted to mention this week was this piece over on WordPress.org. It is to say, actually, it potentially could be a little bit stale by now. And in all honesty, there might be 2 or 3 pieces that have been written since this, but this is the one that caught my attention. WordPress 5.7 release candidate has been announced. And you can see, if you're looking on the live, you'll be able to see the points that are of interest. But if you're not, I'm going to read them out because you might be listening to this on audio. Robots API and media search engine visibility. I didn't explore that one too much, so if anybody in a minute has something to say, let me know. We've also got the detect HTTPS support, and apparently this comes with a button. you can now click a button, and rather than having to go and fill out 2 fields and then click save and then get booted out and log in again, you can support HTTPS with a button. Lazy loading iframes, jQuery, we're trying to migrate that over, and hopefully that we're on the last legs of that. We've got this deprecation notice cleanup. We mentioned a couple of weeks ago this admin color palette is being standardized. I forget who did that work, but we had a color palette that we showed on the screen of about 70 colors, and the idea is to distill it down to about 7, I think it was. And then, of course, we've got the newest version of Gutenberg. I will just carry on for a few more seconds, if that's all right, guys, because there's a little bit more to go with this, because there's a second article connected to this, all about the fact that in 5.7 we have the ability to let administrators send password reset links. So if you're looking at the screen, you'll be able to see Sarah Gooding underneath her profile picture. There's the option to reset the password link, and we can talk about how we might find that beneficial a bit later. And finally, I'll throw it in the mix now. This is an article over at make.wordpress.org. And it's entitled Introducing Script Attributes Related Functions in WordPress 5.7. That's probably above my pay grade, so probably we'll have to get Tim to discuss that one. But there we go, lots coming down the pipe. Anybody want to jump in any order? Just yell fastest.
Well, we all thought that the biggest news in this release was the password reset link, and that was good news to me, but Tim, who understands more about this stuff, has highlighted that the inline JavaScript feature is way more important. I didn't really understand why and what it means and stuff. But so, Tim, I was going to, apart from being really delighted about the password reset feature, because having clients, that's really, a useful thing to not have to write that email of describing, have you tried clicking the button? Yeah, oh, no, I haven't. So the JavaScript thing, the fact that you've highlighted it means it must be important. So I wondered, what does it mean to like the everyday user and developers as well?
Well, the short answer is right now, this very second, not a lot. Long term, this will be a feature that can be built on top of. So the idea is, normally we have a method for enqueuing script files, whether they be on a remote resource or bits. So, and that's pretty standardized. Most developers get that you're meant to enqueue a piece of, if you're going to add a CSS file or a JS file, you enqueue it. When it comes to inline scripts, it's a bit more Wild West. There are many ways you can do it, none of them good. And they result in just random blocks of JavaScript and CSS on your page. This is, apart from being really a pain because you can't necessarily find the blocks, you don't know what plugin generated those blocks, etc., has a second problem, which is if you're looking at doing things like security headers and content security policies, which is a content security policy is effectively a firewall for your browser. So it allows the site to say only the following scripts should be run on this site, and that's really handy because you can say if script from badhacker.com runs on my site, and I haven't whitelisted that, so on my allow list, please don't run badhackerscript.com. But right now, if you wanted to do that for the WordPress admin area, we couldn't do something where we could say we only run certain bits of JavaScript on the page because we don't know what bits of JavaScript we're running on the page. So we don't know whether that piece of JavaScript that's running on the page at the moment is good JavaScript or malicious JavaScript. So we have to, in a content security policy, declare, yeah, please allow anything on the page to just run. And it's referred to as unsafe inline. And I think there's probably a hint in the name. When you're having to type out in a content security policy, unsafe, wait, am I doing this? Inline. Yep. Mm-hmm. So what this will allow us to do is we'll be able to finally know what scripts are being generated by WordPress, and we can see what WordPress is generating. We will be able to do things like add nonces to the scripts to say, hey, I'm going to generate this one-time code, which I'm going to reference for all the scripts on the page. If a script or a CSS block doesn't have a nonce, then don't let it through. that's a way down the line. At the moment, it's getting these this basic code into place. And the next step is the big and the hard one. It's going to be convincing everybody who's ever wrote any development code, who's wrote something with inline scripts, to convert it to the new system. Hence why I said, this is great, not today. But it's a really important feature, and it's going to be one of those features that you're going to find a lot of education is going to be needed to really make it work. Your current builds, this isn't going to gain great benefit from. Your new builds, and as you start to build, particularly for theme developers and any plugin developer who has to do anything involving the front end, both WP admin or the front end of the website, these scripts are going to be, these new functions are going to be fantastically useful. And by using them, you're going to make everything better. So please use them.
Yeah, I'm curious as to why this hasn't been made more prominent in the future. And also, I'm just wondering if do you know, Tim, maybe you do, maybe you don't, whether they're sort of borrowing this from, I don't know, another CMS, for example. Somebody's sort of taken the lead on this and WordPress is playing catch up, or is WordPress actually out front here?
I was about to say a really mean comment that WordPress is never out front. That's not actually true. But it's one of those weird bits where we could have standardized this a long time ago. It's just never had the impetus that someone to drive it forward. But there's now a real change generally on the web. A lot of places are getting this idea that, hang on, we probably don't want card skimmers taking payments out of our WooCommerce sites, for example. Most people would be familiar with MageCart. Having a good, strong CSP, a content security policy, would protect against most card skimming, unless they get really clever about it. So there's been a subtle change that from when we first introduced enqueuing scripts, the world has changed a lot since then, and so this is just a sort of next generation, if you like. But it's going to, I say, a reason I think it's not been massively promoted is that this is before you can fully make any real use of this long term, we've got to get the education in place. So I expect to see a drive on, hey, use these new functions where possible.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that was thank you for that. That was a real nice, short yet deep dive into why this is there. Honestly, this is the sort of thing that would have kind of passed me by. So I'm pleased that you mentioned that. That's great, bringing that to the fore.
It's over my head as well, to be honest. But just the fact that there's some good announcements about something that it's not just the main thing is the latest Gutenberg changes or something to upset me. So there's some good. I'm just kidding, but there's some good things for some different headlines for different types of users, and I think that's cool. So I don't know if that's like a different faction of people who work on those sort of things and managing to get them pushed through. I'm not sure, but it seems like it's good news that it's moving in the right direction under the hood in other aspects of WordPress as well.
It's a lot of the little things get pushed through as almost silent releases, and you only find out about them afterwards. And unless you follow the Make blog, which is a really good tool for developers to follow, not necessarily the most easiest thing for someone who would just consider themselves a user or just who is an administrator. They often, as you say, go over most people's heads. But the downside to that is they make terrible video materials. Showing off the latest Gutenberg changes is nice and visual, and you can understand why they get into the video.
Yes.
Function calls, not so much, but the information's out there. And each iteration, there's normally one or two tiny improvements. Just doesn't feel like it goes at the same pace.
It's interesting because I'm back on the WordPress 5.7 release candidate piece, and it just does that. I could be wrong, but it doesn't look like it gets a mention. It maybe isn't one of the. Maybe they try to limit it to 6 or 7 headline pieces. But there you go. Fascinating. Thank you. That was really good. The bit that was of interest to me was the sort of more aesthetic stuff. The color palette stuff, as well as the Sorry, Bernhard.
Nathan, don't worry. You still got 61 colors to choose from. So
Yes,
not bad.
yes, I'm not displeased. I kind of like this. I like the endeavour to make that all standardised, though. I must admit, I was liking what I was reading about that. But also this password reset link thing. I sign up to quite a lot of things on WordPress, and a lot of it might be, I don't know, memberships to things and what have you. And really frequently, I mean, it's not every time. It's probably not even 1 in 5, but quite frequently, the process that you have to go through to sign up for things is the password reset. And so they tell you that you've got an account, but that, you know, in nowhere in the email, the template that they've created, do they say, go and do this? You just have to figure it out. And I've always thought, it's really odd that we don't have that. And now we do. But it maybe is cluttering up the UI a little bit because it's quite a long link and it's squashed in amongst all the other little links. I know that Dan maybe the other day was saying he felt it was making an already cluttered UI slightly more cluttered. But at least we've got it now. I can see this being blooming helpful. And yes, Paul, you don't have to squirrel away that email template to use when a client gets locked out.
Yeah, it's good news. Yep.
Okie doke. I think we've done the WordPress 5.7 bit in that case. Should we move on to the Bluehost story, Paul? We had an interesting one this week. It's mentioned on WP Tavern. Sarah Gooding.
Yeah, Sarah Gooding wrote an article. It's entitled Bluehost Misuses WordPress Trademark, Reigniting the Controversy Over Recommended Hosts Page. So just to talk about what the recommended hosts page is, if you go to the WordPress website, somewhere in the nav there's a link to a page called hosting, and on that page there are 3 recommended hosts, which to be honest seem to be the same since 2007 or so, I think, especially because 2 of these hosts, Bluehost and DreamHost, I remember when they were the cool hosts, like those were like, oh yeah, you know, they're like the, you know, small companies and stuff like that, and they, you know, they give you a lot of RAM and everything. And then SiteGround's on there as well. So you got Bluehost, DreamHost, and SiteGround. So SiteGround to me is more recent, I think. But DreamHost and Bluehost just feel like big companies that once upon a time we used to talk about in a kind of positive way. But I don't think that any of these companies that you see on the recommended hosting page, other than maybe SiteGround, tend to come up in almost any community conversation about WordPress hosting. So this page seems to have been the same for a long time. There's a message on the page that talks about how to get listed on the page and that they update it ever so often, which clearly they don't, which might just be an administrative error or something, or they just didn't highlight that. But this story comes up ever so often, that why are these 3 hosts the recommended ones? There's always a lot of conspiracy theories. Some of it's true, some of it might not be. I don't know. The Bluehost is owned by EIG, I think it is, and apparently they were an investor at some point in Automatic years and years ago. Apparently at some point there was some affiliate links on here, but there aren't any more. So people are wondering why these, you know, first of all, setting the scene, why are these links even on the page? The actual article this time that has resurfaced this discussion is that Bluehost tweeted a promotion about their hosting, and they used the WordPress logo in their graphic, which is a violation of the trademark in advertising. And they said in their tweet, there's a reason WordPress officially recommends Bluehost more than other hosting service. It didn't say the reason was because there was an investment years ago. It also didn't say that no one's updated the page, but it definitely implied that they must be awesome to be on that page, which is debatable as to why that page hasn't changed, to be fair. But the story this time is that the logo has been used in the graphics. What's also interesting to me about this story, other than the violation of the terms, is that Josepha Hayden Chomposi, who is the WordPress executive director of WordPress.org, immediately got involved in this and scheduled a call with Bluehost to find a resolution. So apart from, you know, the aspect of why is the hosting page never change, why are those 3 companies there, the issue around using the logo to me feels more like somebody who just worked in marketing didn't know. But then flip to another interesting side. It's like, is it Giuseppe Hayden Champosi's job to call up Bluehost when they use the logo in there? So it doesn't seem to me like that's. Seems to me Giuseppe does a lot of stuff. She must be quite tired. But anyway, that's the story. It's an interesting one because it's throwing up the drama again. And there's some good comments on the WordPress Tavern that bring up some evidence of past violations and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I don't know, guys. What do you think?
Just to say that 13 comments on a WP Tavern article is a pretty good row of comments, actually, and there were 13 on this. And when you get into the 20s, it's usually something really controversial. So there's obviously a bit of feeling. I confess I didn't read the comments, but just could I ask Tim in particular, as somebody who until last year was working with a hosting company, does this sort of stuff, does it irk? Is it irritating? Can you think of any good reason that stuff is there? Does it seem anti-competitive? What's going on?
About 4 years ago, they announced that they were going to do a new round of updating of that page and invited people to make applications. And I remember sitting around a table with a sizable part of 34sp.com's, certainly all the marketing people we had. And we were all chatting about how we write our application. The naivety in this was beyond, because they were talking about how it might be regionalized. It might even be by country. And it's like, oh, well, by country, we're assuring. Yeah, if it's by country, we're assuring. We're like, at the time, we were the only WordPress managed host in the country. This was not going to be a problem. We wrote our pitch, did all that, heard nothing. The site never changed. I think, the sensible solution is to remove it. It is a conspiracy. Depending on how much tinfoil hat stuff you want to go into, you could easily come up with very conspiracy theories that are plausible. Not just wild out there ones. It's quite easy to come up with a fairly plausible conspiracy theory that would pass muster and might even get you to the point of somebody taking you serious and sort of going, oh, that's almost fraud level. But I don't for 1 second think that. I actually think it is what typically happens in WordPress. And I think Paul's comment about Giuseppe probably is an indication of she didn't jump on this because it was anything to do with her. I'm pretty sure she jumped on this because she is A, really nice, and B, one of the very few people who seems to be any good at communicating anything from the senior leadership team in a reliable way that people understand and truly get emotionally. Whenever things like this happen, it is a big ball of emotions. Everybody thinks of hosting as being big companies, and EIG, so Endurance, is a massive company, and GoDaddy are a massive company. The next tier down, the difference in the gulf between them and the next competitors is so far. And for smaller hosts when we're talking about smaller hosts, they have hundreds of thousands of customers. They are small, tiny hosts. For those, being on that page would change their business model. The 3 people who are on that page currently, their business model probably isn't affected by being on it. That's an interesting, with the possible exception of DreamHost, who are in the next tier down. SiteGround and Bluehost, if they were taken off, they would see a massive dip in their traffic, but they wouldn't change their business model completely. If one of the smaller hosting companies got on that page, overnight their business would change. Right. They would be swamped with customers. Potentially anything up to 40,000 customers a day suddenly appearing, potentially coming towards them, at least hitting their landing pages. They are going to be overwhelmed very quickly. And I think Matt's argument has always been, look, we have to put the biggest people on here who can handle that, which is a rubbish argument. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's a good argument, but I can understand why they're saying it. So we have to have these really big companies on here. We can't have smaller companies on here because even if they got lousy support, they can at least sign you up and get you an account. If we put a smaller company on here, they're probably not going to be able to sign you up because their site will fall out. Which, is sort of fair. Yeah. But I just take the page off. I don't understand why he hasn't. It causes, I mean, when you are a person who runs a massive multi-million-dollar company, you have a bunch of other stuff you have to be doing. To say I'm taking personal charge of auditing a single page which has 3 links on it, surely you just go, I don't give up monkeys about this, and I'm just going to delete the page. I'm amazed he hasn't done it.
Let's read. I'm just going to read in full the piece, the reply from Molenweg on the WP Tavern article. I can't provide any context of where this fit in the narrative or what you're saying, but this is just what it says. When the list is open, anyone can apply. I refer the honourable gentleman to the comment Tim gave a few moments ago. I take 100% responsibility for the editorial, though in the past and future we have people help testing hosts and collating all the threads in the forums. I also get a fair number of people emailing me directly feedback about the hosts listed, and how the host follows up in this is part of my evaluation. It's true the list of hosts hasn't changed in a while. It's an interesting use of the word "while," I suppose.
In a while.
Yeah. The current list is all in good standing. I stand by the long-term behaviour and service of every company linked on the page. It is past due for open applications again, but I have prioritised my other work on .org. No one can pay to be on the page, and there are no affiliate payments made for customers sent from that page. It's free, opinionated, and editorially driven. I actually don't quite understand what that sentence means. I do believe it drives many millions a year in business, which is why the potential for things like bribery or conflict is high if it were open to a larger group deciding who's on there.
Nobody at best.
Yeah, I think Tim has possibly the best solution of all. Yeah, if there is concern about the millions that could be generated, and there's a panel of people in there, and you've then got to make a judgment about who ought to be on there and who has literally no connection, then what's the point in the page? If it's only 3 companies who are getting a really big share of the pie from that. And Tim, you just sort of alluded to the fact that if we put tinyhost.com on there tomorrow, it would probably sink them in the short term till they manage to recover. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And some of them are even not the best options in my opinion. So why put them there? I mean, I don't understand it. Just get rid of it.
Yeah, I think so. I think the comment at the beginning about him prioritizing his work on .org is probably the most illustrative. I'm guessing it just sinks to the bottom of the list of things to do. That's fascinating, though. Really fascinating that you went through all that pain and process and sat all of your team around, and then it fell into a black hole. Yeah. So that also, where did he say? Maybe it's time to open up the listing again. Okay.
Probably,
all right.
Oh, yeah. Quick. What you said, Tim, about Josepha, she's very seems very approachable, and I hope that I get to meet her at some point at a WordCamp because she does seem very approachable. And I think you're right, because it feels like there isn't many other of the people that you can name and think, oh, that's the person that. And you have lots of companies where you have this concept of this brand ambassador thing these days. So a company a company needs to have its kind of support from the louder people and the mob as such. I wonder if WordPress.org, I don't know if it works with the whole system with how it is open source and everything. I wonder if it needs more brand ambassador type people who can listen and feedback and make a real impact. Because I know Matt talks about, I do read the tweets, I listen to this, and you'll be surprised, some of the things that I read, they do get pushed through. But no, I don't think people really feel like it does. And then that's why we have all these ridiculous, well, not ridiculous, but, conspiracy theories sometimes and everything. I don't know.
I think WordPress is a massive project, and putting people on pedestals and saying I am associated with brand and the place to point to point your concerns at when it comes to WordPress.
I don't want that job.
Pretty much, yeah, it's pretty much saying please put me in front of the firing squad. I remember that the vitriol that members of the Gutenberg team went through whenever one of them stuck their head off the parapet, and then people complained that they weren't communicating enough. And it's like, well, Last time they tried to
you blame
communicate, you literally went at them with a baseball bat. I mean, you're talking about do they need bodyguards? Not should they turn up at events? And you see the stuff with Mika and the plugins team that was recently, and how she's getting death threats just because she's
my lord, that was the most horrific article.
It's very difficult to suggest who would want to be a brand ambassador for WordPress? And I mean, on paper it sounds fantastic until you've just put it in that context. And I think Josefa's really good at diffusing situations, and this is a good example where you might query why on earth did it go up to her, but the answer is it went up to her because she could stomp on it quickly and come back to you and give an answer that sounded like, oh wow, some dealing with it, and sure enough dealt with. And I think that's why she does so well, is because really good at communicating, and that's something that's been lacking in what is a predominantly boys club driven. It's changed massively in the last few years, but it has been very much the same 4 or 5 people at the top, and they sometimes aren't the greatest communicators. So it is good that we're getting more people at the top who are now understanding that perhaps talking before the baying mob comes and knocks on your door helps, stop baying mobs generally.
Yeah, she's very brave.
Yeah, but you will always get people who disagree with the decision that have been made. So it's there will never be a unanimous, we all like it or we all hate it, because everybody has a different angle coming at the project, because it's used in such many different ways. I mean, it's gotten such a big enterprise in the end, if you think about it. I mean, we discussed the numbers 2 weeks ago. It's just mind-blowing what happened in the last years. And it still seems WordPress is growing. So,
we'll spoiler alert. We'll come to that a little bit later. We've got an article about the growth of WordPress. By the way, we transcribed this. We transcribed this thing, and I foolishly just plucked out of thin air tinyhost.com, and I would just like to make it very clear to the owners of tinyhost.com, who Chris in the comments pointed out that you should go to tinyhost.com. It is without doubt the most slimmed down version of a host I've ever seen, and they need the HTTPS button, by the way. Just saying. We weren't mentioning you. That was just purely by accident. If you come after us with your lawyers, you're probably lawyer.
Other small hosts are available.
Yeah, other small hosts are available. That's right. And Chris, to that point, says, why not just have a huge directory, especially for those looking for a hosting company in their native language? I could see me sort of drilling down on like UK-ness of that, if there was an international version, and I could drill down to ones based in the UK. But then he goes on to say, Chris Hughes in the comments, that is, some bad actors and poor performance hosts. But let's be honest, $2.99 Bluehost is going to be like treacle with Woo. I quite like treacle, just so that you know. Let's leave the Bluehost conversation behind, and we'll move on.
Do you think tinyhost.com right now are just struggling? They're probably, 40,000 people possibly as a result of listening, this podcast.
I know. But you can imagine. Can you? Yeah, exactly.
I think we've probably changed their business.
They don't want to be. They don't want to be a part of that page. They just want to mention
like
this.
a very basic static site, I guess. Their server might handle it.
Listen, there was absolutely no intention for me to in any way promote TinyHost or indeed mention them. I just a mistake. Right. Okay. Let's go on. Let's move on to this piece, which is. Let me just put the screen back on. There we go. This is a big long piece. Go and grab a large coffee for this one. This is by Alex Denning over at getellipsis.com. There's no way I'm going to do this piece justice. I've met Alex a couple of times at WordCamp London, and a very, very amiable and likable chap. And he's really gone to town in this one. And he's putting together the search trends for 2020. And just to paraphrase it, really, it's probably about a 10-minute, maybe a 15-minute read if you actually stop and look at the graphs and try to understand it all. But as you would well imagine, the sort of searching overall for WordPress has gone up, especially during 2020. WooCommerce I'm showing a graph at the minute where we're looking at the percentage increase in WordPress searches related to WordPress. He splits that out a little bit more, and he's a bit more nuanced than the graph I'm just going to show you. But percentage increase for just WordPress and various words associated with that has gone up by 14%, which in any year is pretty incredible. Plugins has gone up by 18%. WooCommerce by an incredible 44%. I don't know if that trend is set to continue. When kind of the post-COVID world finally greets us and we're back to normal bricks and mortar shops. I wonder how many WooCommerce shops will sort of pass away, or whether it will still maintain its interest. Certainly hope so. And then finally, themes has gone up 9%, but in real terms, that could be seen as a decline. The expectation would be that would have gone up slightly more, and you'll have to delve into the article. But yeah, essentially, WordPress is on the rise, as you might imagine. Look at this, WordPress hosting. We've got on the screen average search volume per month. 2019, it was 38,500 for just WordPress hosting, those two words.
You think they'd all go to wordpress.org/hosting?
Well, that's right. And
why are they searching?
Type in Bluehost
driving that,
or SiteGround, or and it's gone up by 22%, 447,000. I won't bore you with the statistics, because if you're listening to this, it's going to be really uninteresting. But just to say, it's looking solid for plugins. It's looking really solid for WooCommerce, the stuff that Google's driving. Little bit less so if you're in the theme business, and Alex tries to go into why. So curious about your thoughts.
Well, I mean, why themes are less? It's easy, because everything else gotten bigger. I mean, if I think back a few years, there was one or two form plugins, and there was one plugin for this and that. And now take a look at how many form plugins are out there, or how many options for e-commerce, because you have Woo and you have others, and the big commerce trying to get people over and stuff like that. And I don't know, search engine, I mean, there has been Yoast and not much more. And now we have so many more with Rank Maps, EUPress, and all the others. Same for almost every area where plugins exist. So naturally, there are more people searching for stuff in that area, because the theme isn't the only thing. And I think that's the big reason behind it. That it's just a diversification we are seeing with WordPress.
Mm-hmm. Paul, in your previous life with working in your agency, did you over the last year get more phone calls for WooCommerce related stuff, or was it just that sort of blended into the background? Because with that increase, you'd imagine that that's half of what the phone calls are these days.
I wouldn't say we got more phone calls, but I'm using WooCommerce a lot more. I mean, just today, I think it's going to launch tomorrow. Actually, we're launching a website for a kind of choir or opera consort, and they can't obviously do any performances at the moment. And usually they weren't doing any performances in their own venue because they didn't have one. It'd be performances in different venues around the UK. But they're launching today or tomorrow an on-demand one where they recorded some things, and it's using WooCommerce, and it's enabling the user to buy a season pass so they can watch the different streams that come out on the 8th and then the 22nd and 3rd, etc. And so that's a company that was never going to use WooCommerce, but they are now, and it's been an absolutely fantastic solution for them. In terms of the themes going down, I think that seems natural. I don't think it means that the theme is dead by any means at all. I think it's just that maybe a few years ago, themes were what businesses saw as the solution in WordPress. They needed to pick a theme, and maybe they would pick X theme or Jupyter or one of the ones on Theme Forest or something like that, because that's where you sort of had your especially the DIY would get their one-stop solution from the theme that came with all the things that you needed. Whereas I think now the people who are all doing those searches are probably not the people who already have their stack sorted out like we probably do. They're people coming into it going, where do I start? And the thing that they're not probably searching for is themes as much. I mean, I know that a lot of DIY users for tools like Elementor think that WordPress is the add-on and that Elementor is the main thing, and then there's this like plugin called WordPress that sits in the back that doesn't look as good or something. And so I think the trend is great for the growth. I don't think it's necessarily that WordPress is amazing. It's a reflection of the success of WordPress, but yeah, I don't know. I think that's me. WooCommerce, I can see it getting bigger and bigger. Themes will have their place in things, and then it'll be interesting to see what happens around page builders in the next year or two. But just a note, if you do Google or WordPress hosting, number 2 for me is the WordPress hosting page on WordPress.org.
Is it?
It's number 1 on DuckDuckGo with no ads showing. So it's almost like they are sucking up all that.
Yeah.
Traffic. Well, sorry, I'm going back.
Yeah. Stop that.
We're past that.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. Just a breathtaking amount of time being spent on WooCommerce at the moment by a lot of people, and the article is actually picked up by Chris Lemmer, who has a piece about it. It's kind of a follow-on piece, and he talks about the WooCommerce growing during this period. And he comes from is it Nexus that he works for?
Yes.
Is it Nexus?
Yes,
Nexus Liquid Web, that's the name that I'm more familiar with. They're one and the same thing?
One bought the other. Hosting. I don't know which way it went, but I think one was bought by the other, so they are combining the stuff.
Tim, you were saying their specialist is...
They actually accidentally bought each other out. There was just so much money, they just left it.
The exact same moment.
So now they just put both.
They bought each other out. That's that's brilliant. Anyway, he picks this up and talks about the growth, not just for small businesses, and he goes into pains to say, I don't really know what small is, but the fact that there's now some seriously large businesses, millions of dollars businesses using WooCommerce. And I kind of never really thought that would be the place where people would go for $1 million businesses, or felt that WooCommerce wouldn't be that. They'd have something bespoke, or I don't know, but no. So I'm told it's just great if you've got those huge businesses as well. Anyway, he links to Alex. It's called Last Week in WooCommerce Growth. Did you, Tim, go on?
I was going to say, I would like to say that this is someone who basically specializes in WooCommerce hosting, telling you WooCommerce is great.
Yes, you're right. Yeah. In fact, if you look at the piece at the beginning, you only need to. This first paragraph sort of says that. Did you say that the company that they work for, Liquid Web Nexus, that's a specialist that they deal primarily in WooCommerce? That's their thing.
The Nexus, they seem to have moved it so that the Nexus brand is their WooCommerce focused side.
Got it.
So Liquid Web has been a large. I'm going to use that word large, but actually in scale, not large compared to some of them. But they're a fairly big company, and they're using the Nexus brand to drive their WooCommerce side.
I can't keep up with all this.
A few years back already, Liquid Web started to do optimization for WooCommerce in the background, like moving stuff to separate tables, like when WooCommerce started to enable all that stuff. So they focused heavily on improving performance with WooCommerce sites in key areas. So it's natural that they promote it. And I wonder, I haven't used any other real shop solution besides WooCommerce. And I think it's partly WordPress had success because it was easy accessible and usable, and you had many people using it, and like Word, everybody knew how to use Word, so maybe it was the de facto standard. I don't know. And I think it's still, compared to other tools, fairly easy to extend or to modify, because you fastly find a PHP developer who can do, maybe not in the best way, but in a way that works for you, iterate on your WooCommerce store. And if you try that for Magento or other tools, you pay far, far more money. So it's
I was just going to say that Matt Medeiros did an interview with Matt Mullenweg recently. 2 Matts on one podcast at once, and Matt was. I can't even say Matt M, can I? Matt Mullenweg was really bullish about the chances of WooCommerce being almost like 1% of what it's capable of being right now. When I came into the WordPress space, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, it felt like people would talk about WooCommerce in amongst other stuff as part of their blog. It would be a thing. Whereas now there's like whole blog networks, and you've got blogs just only talking about WooCommerce. It's growing and growing, and obviously it's an area of strength. And Chris Hughes in the comments again. Thank you, Chris. You're commenting a lot today. He says he's got a few million dollar Woo sites that he manages, digital products. As long as you know the limits, it's okay. But he does rely on external services. Metoric, I can't say I know what that is, but Metoric, etc. He says. Okay.
Statistics.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of money. There's a lot of money. There's going to be tons of money. I mean, when you click on the Nexus website link, I was just browsing through. I was wondering, like the GoDaddy WooCommerce hosting has a deal or something with Automatic where they get if you're a buyer of that product, you get a bunch of these extensions for WooCommerce, like membership subscriptions, some of those things that people need. I was looking on the Nexus one. They've made some deals, I think, and this is what all this acquisitions is always about. You can see that if you sign up with the WooCommerce deal with Nexus or Liquid Web, you're getting things like iThemes Pro, you're getting Astra Theme Pro, you're getting a bunch of extensions that like a pro thank you page creator, which people need because I mean, just this WooCommerce site that I was just making like these last few days, just to control your thank you page it's just not really there to do that in the core product. So with WooCommerce, it's going to be absolutely massive, I think, for generating income for Automatic and all the hosting companies that can make the right deals and everything. It's going to be astronomical money involved in this.
We've had so many plugin developers on the show. There's a few lined up. I think I've probably got about 3 in the queue coming up soon about plugin developers who make a living out of just doing one tiny customization to WooCommerce carts. They offer the ability to modify the flow or the layout or whatever. And that keeps their the bills paid. Just that one little modification. It's amazing. Right. Let's put Woo behind us and talk about this piece, which is over on WP Tavern. This is Justin. Well, crikey, we've got to 53 minutes into the podcast and we haven't mentioned Justin Tadlock. I'm going to have to have a sit down. We're on a piece called FSE, standing for Full Site Editing Outreach Round 2, building a custom homepage with Gutenberg Site Editor. What's this all about, Paul?
Well, this is the first of 3, I think the last 3 of our articles that we're covering, which all cover different ways that you can build WordPress in a full site editing kind of way. And this is obviously the official core version of full site editing with WordPress, which is obviously very early in its days at the moment. Anne McCarthy, who works for Automatic and is, as far as I know, I've chatted to her on Slack a little bit, is kind of her job. One of her jobs at the moment is to help people through the testing process and try and get people involved in the testing process of the full site editing. So from the WordPress Tavern article, there is a link at the top where you can click through to the testing page on the make.wordpress.org. And what it does on that website is talks you through step 1, step 2, step 3, join in the dots to help you experience full site editing from the ground up where they're at this point, and then they're inviting you to feedback on that. So you start with setting up just the theme, the WordPress, and then you go into modifying your header a little bit. It asks you to create a bit of a layout, and then also to add a sidebar. And you can see that's what Justin has done. If anyone's watching rather than listening, you can see Justin, who is obviously very skilled, has created a nice looking page about a made up restaurant called The Grilled Cheese, which he said that if he does open, a business in this way. This is what he's going to call it, and this will be the website. So he's had a go at it. You can see in the screenshot that we're all looking at there that it does have a kind of area for where the logo would go. It does have a navigation set, and he has managed to make it look quite nice. So anyone who wants to have a go at this, there is a step-by-step process that Anne McCarthy's page talks you through, and you can have a go, and then you can feedback, and it tells you how you can get involved and feedback on that as well. So yeah, that's where they're at this point. The MVP does look very MVP in that it is their MVP, I think, and Giuseppe has talked about this on her own podcast, I think, and in other places, is really about, can this system create a one-page website with navigation?
Yeah, landing page, yeah.
A landing page with a nav bar. And that is I think what we're all starting to understand MVP means for full site editing. So I'm definitely gonna give it a go. I tried it the first time round, but I think I came into it a little bit late the first time round, and when I downloaded the latest version of the Gutenberg plugin, I couldn't get it all to work, and I think that was because they'd moved on from the test that I tried. So there is a deadline on this. I'm not sure. Let me just check what the deadline is. It's March. Let me just check for you.
March the 1st, 3 p.m. UK time. You've got 4 minutes.
March the 5th. March the 5th. So if you want to have a go with it this week, and then feedback and see what you think, and we can learn a bit more about it.
My first question to you, Paul, would be: was it intuitive? I know that you said that you came unstuck possibly because things were not working. Did you find the bits that you were able to interact with, were they intuitive? Because I know that you're used to using a particular tool.
It wasn't, but I think, to give it all fairness, I don't think it was working right, because I have watched a couple of videos of other people doing it, and I wouldn't go as far as say it was intuitive, but it worked, and it was possible to do it. And Justin, talks about in this article, he could have built the page much quicker in just pure HTML, but it is what it is at the moment. We're at the beginning of this process, really. I think that they've been talking about putting this into core, and that, especially for myself, that's just made me think that they think it's done. But having talked to some of the people, I think that's the important thing sometimes, that if we don't talk to the people, or you get the impression that in fact we're defining goals and milestones completely differently, especially if we're used to commercial products putting out an alpha and it being pretty fully featured. So,
I have to say,
version 2 will be a bit better, yeah. So
I'm really getting familiar with this UI. We're showing on the screen that if you lock Gutenberg's, what is it even called? The editor interface to the top of the page. I've forgotten what the word is. I'm really getting familiar with that now, and everything seemed to have settled down nicely. Everything's where I expect it to be, and it has been for months now. Nothing major has changed, and this really just looks like it's adding extra options on the right. So the one that Justin's highlighting at the moment is, I'm not entirely sure, the query block, I believe it is. And it's all just sort of adding extra buttons and extra features. So long as they don't play with that too much. The navigation kind of looks as though it's something a bit different, because you've got at the top, in the middle, obviously some sort of inspection of which bit you're working at. On the screenshot we're looking at there, Justin's fiddling with the footer. And I guess there's no real way around doing that. You've just got to isolate those things and put it somewhere. But it's all starting to look pretty familiar to me. I like it. I haven't played with it too much, so I can't really say. But I think ultimately this interface will always work for me.
Yeah, well, I think one of the challenges at the moment is that the interface, I think people are getting really familiar with it for a text editor, and for having column left, image over here, video, putting the video there. And it seems to work really well for that. I know we haven't got it as one of our articles, but I know Elegant Themes, is that what it's called? Elegant Themes for Divi? Yeah. Yep. Elegant Themes released an update to their plugin just last week, actually. and if anyone's used Divi Builder, the page builder, it started out as like a back-end builder where you kind of saw everything in a sort of what you would call a wireframe view. So it's kind of structure. You could see your columns, you could see your rows, and you could see your modules. And then you click into a module or a row, and you would edit the settings associated with that row, module, column, or section. And they've obviously recognized that people still liked that, but like to do it on the front end. So they've released something called wireframe view, which means that when you're editing your Divi site, you can edit the front end in wireframe view. So it's not attempting to look like the website anymore. It's just showing you the structure. I think that's quite cool. But then the opposite of that, you've got the pure front end editing. And the challenge the block editor has got with this full site editing thing is that it's trying to be everything. It's trying to be kind of like wireframe view, structure, navigation, all in one thing, and it's a really, really difficult challenge. And I think it's going to take a long, long time to get there. I do think they'll get there, because at some point I think the powers that be will realize some serious investment in time and money maybe needs to go into the UI and the user experience. And at the moment they're on MVP stage. So I've been criticizing the project quite a lot, but I've probably been expecting too much and expecting where I think they are versus where they really are. So I need to give them lots more time, I think.
Yep. Tim, Bernhard, anything, or should we move on?
Well, my point of Gutenberg, it's not there yet. I mean, they are trying, and it's good, because if they would have stopped with WordPress 2.0, we wouldn't talking about WordPress anymore. So it's the natural thing to do, to just iterate and get better and better at the stuff they're doing. For me, it's missing some key parts still, and let's see if they ever get it in, because for me it's all about the field connections, or however you call them, and about mobile editing, and for not editing on a mobile but responsive stuff. And that's where Gutenberg, I don't know, isn't anywhere usable for me in the default state without any add-ons or stuff like that.
My use of it kind of frustrates me a little bit, because it doesn't look exactly how I want it to look. That is to say, I've got the representation on the screen, and it's ever so slightly not how it looks when you click publish and view, because you've got all these extraneous blocks that aren't actually blocks. They're just, well, they're places where you could put blocks. It's the plus icon that, the one plus icon, which expands the row that you're in by, I don't know, a couple of centimeters or something like that, 50 pixels or something. And so it just throws everything out. So you have to accommodate for that all the time. Whereas my experience with things like Beaver Builder, none of that stuff is thrown in. It just really, really, really manages to have a great representation of what you see is what you get. So I think those are the obstacles. We're so used to it looking like it ought to look that when it doesn't, it's a bit frustrating. Anything on that, Tim? Don't know if you use Gutenberg a lot, or.
Well, I'm come from the point where I never used any sort of builder. I just threw out, when I sort of started, there wasn't one. And by the time things like Visual Composer had turned up, they had destroyed any belief that a building software was a good idea, to the point that they could be amazing. All the new, I'm sort of looking at what we're going to be talking about for the next few minutes, and I'm there going, I haven't used any of these. I use Gutenberg. I use Gutenberg because Gutenberg is the future. I look at all the other builders and go, must suck to know that you're effectively going to have to either integrate with Gutenberg or die. There is no, and it will end up that way. So they've got to be now pondering one of those two routes. Do we take what we've got done, and do we make Beaver Builder a fantastically brilliant part of Gutenberg, or do we go and find a new thing to do? And I think they did their little AI assistant thing on this.
Yes.
And you can see that they're diversifying. And you can see people like Elementor, where it feels like they're sort of going, we might end up becoming more Gutenberg friendly. And Generate Press got their blocks and things.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure because take a look at, I don't know, Visual Composer and stuff like that. It's still out there and they're still making, I don't know, it's called VP Bakery now, and they still have sites still being built on it. And Gutenberg is a great tool to make the editor better for WordPress. But I don't know if they haven't yet figured out how to really make it to a full site experience, I guess, because Elementor and Beaver Builder and all the others are ahead of them, and they will keep iterating on their product. So the question is, how fast will Gutenberg itself catch up, or will they ever catch up? Because I don't know, you have stuff in the core and still many plugins which iterate on that, which add features to that. So maybe it's the whole ecosystem, and you still have a Gutenberg builder then, which adds to Gutenberg, like Blocksy, or I don't know, like a generate blocks and stuff like that, because Gutenberg just lays the groundwork. I don't know.
It's interesting. Sorry, Tim, you carry on.
No, I was just going to say, I don't think they need to catch up. They just need to be good enough that nobody goes to look for anything else.
Yeah, that's.
They might not catch up. They might not get the current people who use Elementor. They might carry on using that forever. But all the new people, and WordPress is increasing its market share. WooCommerce is increasing its market share. Those new people aren't going to be looking at Elementor, and hopefully we've managed to bury Visual Composer enough that they're not ever going to find that. I'm sure Visual Composer is fantastic these days, but those things will disappear because the market, because people will just see the shiny builder and go, well, that doesn't work with the shiny builder. Oh, that must be the old thing.
It's interesting because over the last few months, Tim, we've had quite a lot of conversations, and the one that sort of stands out as a success story is Elementor, which you've just mentioned, so you've heard about it. And the piece that I've now closed the tab, sadly, so I can't really resurrect it. But the Alex Denning piece about the searches, Elementor really bucked that trend over the last couple of years. They've almost become and. Again, I'll throw into the mix, they are about to throw a SaaS product out there, which I'm presuming is in some way built on WordPress. I'm not entirely sure if that's true or not, but they've almost become a brand. You build an Elementor website. You don't, and you never really need to interact with WordPress. So it's quite interesting. I think you're probably right, Tim, but I can see that for a really long period, people will search for Elementor and so on and just sort of build out with those solutions, possibly, and some of the other ones. And the market is just sort of separating a little bit. And at the minute, they satisfy exactly what they need to achieve. They can do all the full site editing. It really does look like it's supposed to look and so on. You click save and all that happens is the editor goes away and everything's exactly as it was 5 seconds ago, just without the editing Chrome. Whereas Gutenberg isn't there yet, and I just desperately want it to show that. And it is slowly but surely. These little component parts are dropping in full site editing. It's great. I'm loving it.
I have to say my opinion is getting changed slowly. I do think that the page builders will continue to be relevant until there is a third-party vendor that uses the Gutenberg basis and provides the quick solution for everyone that when someone actually onboards onto that solution, totally works for them. So if you want a WooCommerce site, it's maybe like there's a couple of vendors out there now that are doing it, and they've got a set of blocks, they've got some WooCommerce add-ons, they've got this and that, the other, they've got the core theme, etc., and they're presenting the entire solution. It's maybe not using full site editing, but if you combine all their tools, you can do the majority of the things that you wanted to do with Beaver Builder or Elementor or something else with just their tools, which are very block-based.
I'm just waiting for the segue. I'm waiting for the segue. When's he going to say it?
No, I wasn't going to say GeneratePress, but no, I wasn't actually, because GeneratePress is doing a different thing. GeneratePress is, so I'm talking about cadence really. That's what I'm talking about when I think you go to a website and you see their templates, and their templates are ready to go, they look good, and they've got everything you need, and you don't need to use the page builder. And if they can do that, then the future can be, they can outmarket that this is the good solution versus someone else who can go, don't use the block editor stuff, it's too difficult, use Elementor. Yeah, they can say that at the moment, and they can probably win that argument until things like Web Vitals comes really into play, and the junk that comes with, something like Elementor or Visual Composer, for instance, is just overwhelming on their Google rankings or something. So I do think it is possible, but it will take the block editor to be good enough that a third party can market it and make a ton of money out of it, and then all the affiliates can make a ton of money out of it, and basically the community can get on in it and start advocating, this is great, because people don't like to advocate for bad experiences. They're not going to say, you should use this, it's really hard, spent weeks doing
WordPress.com
it, my speed score. Yeah.
Just saying.
But yeah, the segue you were talking about was...
Yeah, I honestly thought you were leading into that. Damn.
I wasn't,
okay.
actually. I wasn't.
Okay.
It fits well into it.
It does fit into it to a certain extent. Yeah, GeneratePress have their Generate blocks, and we know, because we've talked to Tom a few times, that GP Premium 2.0 is a massive relief for GeneratePress's add-on GP Premium, because it introduces what they call here the GP GeneratePress theme builder. Essentially, without going into too much details here, they are showing in a way how full site editing with dynamic data can be done with the block editor. And I think there's them, and there's Toolset, and probably Pods Pro is moving in that area to be able to create archive pages, single post templates, with ease, without having to understand the complexities of something like the WordPress theme hierarchy and how that all works. Now, GeneratePress has done a great job of this, and a lot of people are very excited about it. I'm pretty excited about it. I can't wait to have a play. Nathan, you've had a play with it. Essentially, it's something a bit like Beaver Thema, Toolset, Pods, all kind of... You can create the same kind of solutions. It's quite early in its release. This is 2.0. But Nathan, you've had to play with it, and they are, as you've said, still limited by the poor UI of the block editor in general, that it's still quite difficult to use because the tool that they're building on top of is not quite easy to use enough for the typical user.
Yeah, I basically followed. Whenever you come across these tools, I always find the easiest way is just to follow a video tutorial if it's on the site and just sort of copy what they were doing. So that's basically what I did. And so on the screen now is something which I tried to achieve. And the sort of disconnect here on the Generate blocks one is that you've got like this metadata box at the bottom, which is where you've got to hook up where it appears. So you've gone out of the Gutenberg UI and you've dropped into their proprietary display rules at the bottom, and it's easy to understand. It's a piece of cake. You just tell it where to go, entire site or what have you. But the primary thing was just Gutenberg sort of getting in the way. You would click on something and then you weren't quite sure whether you'd clicked on it because things were nested within other things. So you had to use I don't even know what it's called. Is it the inspector? The little three icons which indicate the hierarchy of the blocks, and then select the right blocks so that you've changed the background color of the correct one, not the thing which it's contained in. And then you get little residual bits like on the site, the little plus icon living in its full width box, taking up room in the UI, gets in the way. But if you can get over all of those little stumbling blocks and you just agree to accept that that's the compromise you've got to make at the moment, it worked. And you click update and look at it on the front end, and it worked really well. And I do love the little container block that Tom's built, where you can stick a container in, then stick a grid inside the container, and then do what you like once you're in there. They're much more straightforward than anything I've seen. But there were just some again, going back to my grandmother analogy, there's no way my grandmother could have used this. There were just too many things you needed to understand prior to getting involved. But watching the video really did help. But it's the future. I think this is a really a novel way of doing it, but you can only imagine that in the future, a lot of this stuff that's at the bottom on the screen will have to drop into a menu on the right-hand side just to obey the conventions.
One thing, just to give your give the product its due, or to give it a break as such, is that you did clarify to us that your grandmother has sadly passed away. So
yes, she is basically unable to build any websites. You've raised a sore point there, Paul. I'm just going to go and have a little weep over in the.
I think it was just fair to GeneratePress to highlight.
Yeah,
that,
no, it's good, and it's considering what's available. Of all the things that I've tried, this is fabulous.
I mean,
really
into
good.
This discussion about complexity, in the end, with all those kind of team builder stuff, be it Blocksy, where you can hook your stuff, be it the Astra hooks, or be it the GeneratePress hooks, or now the Generate blocks with field connections or dynamic data, however you call it, has been theme territory for years, where developer builds stuff for others to use. So these tools just move, I think, kind of in between the people who know how to do it themselves anyway, and people who build sites and maybe just need a little bit more stuff, and now they can move in this in-between area. But you still need to understand how the hierarchy in WordPress works. What is an archive page? What is a single and singular page and stuff like that? So maybe it's for the and I'm kind of fit in that category. I build sites with those tools because it's quicker and easier, and I don't need the latest performance and the latest millisecond, because most of the customers don't care, because they don't compete with bigger sites where they might need to rank higher because they have their niche, or they have their tool, or they have their local audience. And then they don't care if they load in 1.5 or 1.7 or 2.2 seconds, as long as it doesn't take 15 seconds to load the site. They just want to work with it. So it's hard. It's sometimes easy to lose the site on for what user the tools are built, or who uses the tools. Because, I mean, talking about 50 to 60% of the web pages using WordPress, that's a myriad of different customer types.
Yeah, that's a good point. I suppose to Tim's point about it becoming the default at some point, when it's good enough, it will do. But we're just used to commercial products needing to be all bells and whistles from the get-go, and this is not that process. And as you've identified, Paul, you've kind of worked that through in your own head, that this is just one little step at a time. When it's good enough, people, I imagine Tim's right, will just start using it because it works. Right, we are running out of time, so I'm going to press us on.
One thing,
sorry. I'm not.
Who will love this product, right, is your classic Genesis user who used to build their websites with hooks and filters and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, but especially the Genesis user who had to read a lot of tutorials a lot of the time and copy and paste the code snippet, because what GeneratePress Premium 2 does is essentially it's using all the hook locations throughout the website, which is very, very similar to Genesis framework. But you don't need to know code. You can swap code for the block editor, basically. So you can design your areas in there. Yeah, we've all been laughing at your comments, Lee.
Sorry.
That's good.
I love you too, Lee.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that aspect of it. Yeah.
This hook question, I mean, that's the one interesting thing I did see just today in a video with Blocksy. They even allow you to target the second H2 on the side to hook then your custom block into it and display your block. So it's very interesting where all this leads. And if more and more people use it, I wonder, some of it for me would belong in the core of the Gutenberg, like those dynamic data field connection type of stuff, because now we have GeneratePress building their own way, and Blocksy has some of it, and I don't know, Cadence already has, I'm not sure, and there was another block suite which adds that, and then there's a plugin which adds it to several blocks. So that's even more crazy than it was before.
Yeah. Oh dear.
Because before we had just short codes and they worked.
I thought we were going so well there. We're back to square one. Right, forget it. Forget Gutenberg. Just right. I'm stopping. I'm stopping this podcast. We don't need WordPress anymore. Lee is sharing some nice comments about. You can't see, but Tim has a resplendent beard, and my paltry little effort. Or indeed, Paul's paltry effort is not as good, frankly.
Yeah, I even tried Just for Men, didn't I, the other day?
It's the lockdown beard. I've got the lockdown on top, which I've noticed you're sporting a bit of as well, Tim. Actually, I noticed.
Yes,
there
is the ponytail behind.
Little ponytail.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Right. Last one then, very quickly, because we've got very little time left. We're just going to mention that Oxygen users. Yeah, exactly. So. Oxygen have released version 3.7. They're just sort of flying under the radar. I really think this is quite a product. I really do like it. And whilst I don't really use it too much, I follow it really closely. And what they've got in this new section 3.7 is two things probably worth mentioning. They've got the option to use their new CSS grid capability. My advice would be, rather than me trying to explain it, just watch this video of Elijah, who's the lead developer, Elijah Mills, and probably the first 5 minutes he explains the UI for putting things into your CSS grid, and it's just really nicely done. You know, if you were to sit down and think, okay, again, going back to the example of my grandmother, could my grandmother do this? No. Could she do it with Oxygen? Yes. Is it really easy? Yeah. I mean, is it ridiculously easy? And the answer is yes. It's done really, really well. So kudos to them. And secondly, something that I didn't know was coming was they've got the first paid for add-on for Oxygen, which is called Composite Elements, and it's kind of like a pre-built set of things that a typical user might want to chuck into a site. I actually can't remember the example that they used in the video, but it's typical things that they've probably noticed over time their users have been trying to mega menus, that kind of thing,
circular counters, review boxes, flip boxes, dynamic sliders.
Yeah, all of the bells and whistles that would require you to know a bit of JavaScript, CSS, and so on. And you know, typical website user might not know that stuff, so they've built it in. And I think it's something like $29 a year. So that's their first forays into something paid. But it looks really nice. I'm sorry, Elijah, we didn't do it any justice there, did we? But somebody in the comments, who's that? Premnath, hello Premnath, says Oxygen is awesome. That's good to know. But yeah, I'm done. I have nothing else to add. We always end. I was
going to say Oxygen was like really talked about a lot, wasn't it, in your last summit, the Page Builder Summit?
So that was really, really, well, not a surprise as such, but it gained way more attention than I expected. And we only had a couple of talks about this Page Builder Oxygen, and there was a lot of people who were it was almost like they'd got on board years ago because they were very effusive about what they could already achieve with it. But they're obviously a community. Maybe it's I don't know how they run their stuff. Do they do Facebook groups or what? I don't know. But it's not something I've really dipped my toes into too much. But it was really, really well received. And he's a great. What's the word? He's just the perfect person to make these kind of videos. He just punches it out in 10 minutes, and it's exactly what you want. Tells you what you want to know. 10 minutes done.
I know nothing about Oxygen, particularly other than that video. That video was really impressive. I would love to see the CSS grid as a Gutenberg block.
Yes. Yes. You're going to build that now, aren't you? Between now and 4 o'clock. No. Okay. Yeah.
Well,
something like that.
That.
Yeah, that's a good point. We should probably mention that, shouldn't we? Microthema can do all that kind of stuff. But yeah. I always say that, don't I? You're right, Cameron. I always say we're about to end, and then somebody pipes up and has extra things to add. But I'm conscious that I don't want to. Oh, I'm desperately trying to end it now because I have to go in 6 minutes' time exactly. So you'll forgive me. And look, I've actually literally blotted Bernhard out of the video. So we are going to have to go, whether we like it or not. 6 minutes remaining, 5 minutes remaining, 4 minutes remaining. Thank you. Thanks for coming on, Tim, for the first time. Would love to have you back. See you in a few months' time if things have changed. Thanks, Bernhard. Thanks, Paul. Anything anybody wants to say? Anything happening this week, especially? I'm just working, putting out podcasts, that kind of nonsense.
Same.
No, go and test Pods 2.8. We need feedback.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Test Pods 2.8. They need feedback. All right. Very nice. Thank you very much. Now we're about to enter the bit that we do every single week where we have to awkwardly wave until StreamYard decides it's had enough of this. I press the button, but the waving could go on for any length of time. Thanks for joining us, guys. Take it easy. Bye. And it keeps going.